Hi again, everybody. Master Geek here with the third review of the D&D Next playtest packages character sheets. This review is actually going to be combining two character sheets into one review because one of them is extremely short and the other one isn't quite as long as the spellcasting sheets are. And the two reviews this is going to be covering is going to be the Dwarf Fighter and the Halfling Rogue. Again, I'm going to be ignoring the top half or the top portion of the first page of the character sheets. It's the abilities, the attributes, the basic description. As I said in the other reviews, it's just the stuff that is pretty standardized for any fantasy role-playing game. And this is the more interesting aspects, the features, background, and theme. We're going to be starting with the Dwarf Fighter. And the race here is Hill Dwarf. I guess I mentioned with the Dwarf Cleric, there are two types of dwarves represented in the playtest package. In the package itself, there doesn't look like there's any mechanical differences. It's purely cultural, but maybe there's going to be something instituted once the game is actually released. Next up, it says the class is Fighter. This is the one class where they don't go into any depth on the second page about class features, and I'm assuming it's just because they're so short they mention it right here. And what that is their weapon and armor proficiencies, which is they can use any weapons and any armor. And then the only class feature they actually get at level 1 is something called Weapon Focus. And what that is anytime they use any kind of a weapon, they get to add +2 to their damage roll. The background for the Dwarf Fighter is going to be Soldier. Again, like the other ones, this is going to be a background for the character, much like an occupation. It gives a description here of what a soldier is, and then the skills that the Dwarf Fighter gets +3 bonuses to would be Intimidate type actions, Perception type actions, and Survival actions. And then on towards the bottom of the page, they are going to touch on, again, the special feature, which for the fighter is called Endurance. And if you remember when I mentioned earlier in one of my reviews that I did say that one of the character sheets has a feature that's kind of mechanically based, but not really, this is going to be the one I'm going to talk about, and you'll see that in just a minute. The theme for the fighter is called Slayer. Again, it touches briefly what a Slayer is, what you would expect. And then it says what the ability is for the Slayer. And the ability for the Slayer theme is Reaper. And what that is anytime you miss with an attack, you still deal damage equal to the ability score modifier of what you use to make the attack. So if you shoot at someone with a crossbow, you'd add your dex bonus to the attack. If you hit someone with a sword, you'd add your strength bonus to the attack. Then it goes on equipment and treasure, goes into racial features, and I mentioned this with the other dwarf, but if you didn't watch that video, here it is. They have Dwarven Resilience, which means they're immune to poison. Low light vision, which just means if there's no light within 30 feet of them, they treat shadows as normal and darkness as shadows. And then there is speed, where they don't suffer any kind of an encumbrance penalty for wearing armor or for being encumbered. And then stone cunning again, which is where they always know their proximate location underground. Now we're to the background feature for the Dwarf Fighter, and again I said that's called Endurance. And what that means is the dwarf can perform strenuous physical activity. What it boils down to is the dwarf can carry twice as much, the Dwarf Fighter, I'm sorry, can carry twice as much as a normal person could without being encumbered. So while normally encumbrance is 10 times your strength skill, or your strength attribute, in this case it would be 20 times for the Dwarf Fighter. So for example, normally he has a strength of 16, so normally he'd be able to carry 160 pounds before being encumbered. Now since he has the background feature for Soldier, that means he gets to carry 320 pounds before suffering any kind of encumbrance penalties. Additional levels for the fighter. At level 2, again, he bumps up his hit dice, he gets more hit points, and then he gets a new fighter feature called Fighter Surge. And what that is twice a day, the Dwarf Fighter can take 2 actions on his turn instead of just 1. At level 3, again, it's an increase in hit dice, an increase in hit points, and then he gets an increase in his weapon damage attacks from +2 to +3, and he gets an ability called Cleave. And that's very similar to previous versions of D&D, where if he takes an enemy down to 0 hit points, he's going to be able to make an immediate attack as part of that same action on an enemy that was next to the one he just took down to 0. That's everything for the Dwarf Fighter. Now we're going to move on to the Halfling Rogue, or the Halfling Thief character. His race is Lightfoot Halfling. It touches on what it means to be a halfling. Again, it gives a brief list of what it is the halfling racial features are. The class is Rogue. Gives a description, says what the rogue gets for abilities. Again, these are all going to be explained on page 2. His background is commoner. Says what it means to be a commoner, and then the 3 bonuses that he gets to skills are +3 to animal handling, +3 to commerce, and +3 to folklore type tasks. And then he gets an additional background feature called trade, which I'm going to mention in just a minute. The theme for the rogue is lurker, and what that is he gets a feat called ambusher. When he strikes foes, he strikes them with deadly precision when he catches them unaware. So if he starts his turn hidden from a creature, he has advantage on his first attack against that creature during that turn. And then we go down to the actual explanations of the racial features. Halflings are lucky, and what that means is twice a day when they make an attack roll, a check, or a saving throw, and they get a result they dislike, they can re-roll and use either roll, whichever they would prefer. And then they also have naturally stealthy, and they can hide behind creatures that are larger than you. Basically, they're halflings, so if they're standing behind any medium-sized creature or larger, they can make a hide roll. The background feature is, again, it's trade. It's for the background commoner, and what this does is he knows a trade or practice or profession befitting of his commoner, so he chooses a common profession like blacksmithing or bowyer or carpenter or something along those lines. And he would earn wages to support a standard of living fitting for that profession. Anyone who shares his trade is going to recognize his skill and experience, and they might be willing to share information with you or with him. So basically what it means is streetwise roles or something similar might be a little bit easier if he's talking to someone that has the same profession that he has. And then class features. This is Rogue Scheme Thief. Now I'm not sure if that means once this game is released there's going to be different schemes for different types of rogues, but this particular one is Thief. And what it is he gets a +3 to open locks, a +3 bonus to finding and removing traps, and a +3 bonus to stealth checks. He also gets several more scheme features, one of which is called Thieves' Cant, which anyone that's played D&D knows Thieves' Cant is the secret language of thieves that only thieves know and can speak with each other. And then he gets Thief Hiding, which means it's easier for him to hide than it is for other players. He can hide when he's only lightly obscured, and when he's covered only a quarter of his body or higher. They also have Skill Mastery. Anytime they use a skill in which they have training, which would be the open locks, find, remove traps, and then the skills for his background, he would be able to... The minimum die roll is 10. If he rolls less than a 10, it's automatically a 10, then he adds his bonus from there. They also have Sneak Attack. Anytime that they have advantage on an opponent when they make an attack, they automatically will do an extra 1d6 damage. Now, this isn't just advantage from hiding or advantage from sneaking from behind somebody. It's advantage for any reason. So if there are spells that give him advantage or anything along those lines, he will still get a sneak attack bonus. He has Tools of the Trade, which means that the thief will have thieves' tools that would be able to allow him to pick locks and disarm traps, which normally you couldn't do without those items. And it says what his weapon and arm proficiencies are. Lastly, we move on to the additional levels for the thief. At level 2, again, increases his hit dice, increases his maximum hit points, and then he gets 2 more benefits for being a rogue. He gets Knack, which means when he makes a check, he gets advantage on that check. He can use that twice a day, and it's a check for anything. And then he has Night Vision. If he spends at least 1 minute in darkness or shadows, he treats darkness as shadows and shadows as normal light. And then level 3, again, more hit dice, more maximum hit points, and then he gets the ability called Skulker. And what that means is if he's hidden from a creature, if he makes a ranged attack roll against that creature and misses, he can stay hidden from the creature. He doesn't automatically break his hide, so he could still take the same benefit in the next round. That's everything for these 2 character sheets. This is probably a little bit longer than normal, but they would have been too short, I think, separate. At least the fighter would have. That means next up is going to be the last of the reviews of the character sheets. It's going to be the Elf Wizard. Stay tuned, guys. Keep watching. After the Elf Wizard, probably the next review you're going to see is after I get a chance to do the playtest. Have a great night.